it as fast as we can. So, without further ado, I want to start our webinar today, Iran at War, Survival, Succession, and what comes next. Our guest today is Dr. Sina Azodi, who is the director of the Middle East Studies Program at George Washington University, specializing in U.S.-Iran relation, nuclear non-proliferation, and Iranian foreign policy. Is also the author of the forthcoming book, Iran and the Bomb, the United States, Iran, and the Nuclear Question, which is going to be available this year. And Sina also will share the Amazon link, that's going to be available for that. So, Sina, let's begin with the question that everybody every hour are asking me, which is, how long do we need to wait until this is over? And in other words, for me to, I know that you don't have that prophecy power. So let me ask you from the perspective of the Iranian leadership, how long can they last with this? I mean, how long can they take it? The bombardment, which is massive, we haven't seen something like this. The Gulf War, the shock and awe operation is nothing compared to this. This is how massive this is. So, for how long can this Iranian leadership continue knowing that the military operation and the skies above and being hunted with all of that? For how long can they last? And you're on mute, by the way.
What?
Oren, thank you for organizing this and having me
Okay.
again. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, they often are together.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I hope that if anyone has loved ones in the region, in Tehran, regional countries, Israel, Kuwait, whatever they are, I hope they're safe. To answer your question, the best answer is I don't know because it's very complicated. What I do know, there are two things that I know and I'm sure of. One is that the Islamic Republic is very resilient. You are talking about a regime that, as I've always said, it was born into a revolution, a rather peaceful revolution. It survived many assassinations, including the assassinations of one of its first presidents, its second president, first prime minister, members of the cabinet, the now late Ayatollah Khamenei survived an attempt on his life, which left his right arm paralyzed to the end of his life. At the time when it was fighting Iraq in a bloody all-out war. It also endured decades of U.S. sanctions. So you're dealing with a regime that is quite resilient, has been preparing for this scenario for over a year now. And I will give you some more details of how they've been preparing. And also, you're talking, let me give you some details, for example. When the bombing campaign started on Saturday, when Ayatollah Khamenei was out of the picture, Iranian armed forces, it took them only 5 hours or 6 hours to begin responding. Compare this to June 2025, when it took Iran 16 hours at the time when the commander-in-chief was still in charge. It tells you that they were planning for this. Immediately after the war started, the government agencies, ministries went to 50% capacity. Schools and universities went to virtual sessions, virtual classrooms. Buses and metros were free or are free. So it means that the government has been planning for this for a while. And it's not that easy to basically force a regime collapse or a regime change when you're prepared for this. It takes a lot more than decapitation. And speaking of decapitation, we know now that all high-ranking officials were asked prior to the war to appoint up to 4 deputies in case they are taken out in decapitation strikes. So that's with the resilience of the Islamic Republic. At the same time, you are the president and the Israeli leadership are facing the weight of history. And what do I mean by that? Since the air campaigns came to existence, or I should say, bombing campaigns came to existence in World War II, we don't have a single example where massive bombing campaigns led to a regime collapse or a regime change. In World War II, German and Japanese cities were being firebombed beginning of January 1945. Neither Japan nor Germany surrendered while they were being bombed from the air. Germany was occupied and was defeated on the battlefield, on the ground, and the Japanese were bombed by atomic weapons, and they were facing the imminent threat of Soviet invasion on August 8th, 1945. That's why they surrendered. Operation Rolling Thunder in in Vietnam, that did not force the Vietnamese to capitulate. It only led them to decentralize even further and entrench themselves. That's with Vietnam. In Serbia and in Iraq, in both cases, air campaigns alone did not force them to surrender or capitulate to NATO or US demands. In the case of Iraq, regime change happened only after there was a full ground invasion. So what can we learn from these? Evidence is quite clear. Bombing campaigns do not bring regime change or collapse. Again, and as I said, my first reason was this system is quite resilient. So I don't know how long. I can't give you 6 months, a month. I cannot give you. But if I were to bet, I would say that the Islamic Republic will survive, but we will witness or we will experience an Islamic Republic V2, a new leadership with perhaps a change of direction. So that's where I'm going to stop.
So I heard it a lot from many of the Iran experts. The resilience of the regime, the fact that the regime is not just you remove one person aside and the whole thing collapses like we saw in Syria. The fact that it's much more rooted, structured, etc. The same thing goes for the historical comparison. That is something that I've heard quite a lot as well. But I want to challenge you because I like to challenge the
Please,
conventional wisdom when it comes to that.
please.
So two things come to mind. The first one is it looks like the Israelis are applying what the same strategy that I have applied in Lebanon with Hezbollah, and over there the decapitation, first Nasrallah, later the second person who came to succeed him, less than 24 or 2 days afterwards, he was already dead. Already dead. So that's one. So it looks like the Israelis are applying what we call the mon, basically the cut in the mon in the lawn, so to speak, strategy of cutting short of the leadership every time that someone rises. And the second is that this is a regime that is not popular at home. At best estimates, and we had a webinar, we spoke about this many times before. At best estimates, I hear the number 20% support, and this is something that people tell me that it's exaggerated.
Yeah.
So it's facing here a situation where the leadership is being hunted in a Lebanese style, i.e., Hezbollah strategy. People underground protesting in January being killed by the regime. So it's definitely not popular, and it's not more popular. Yeah. It's feared, but not more popular. Yeah. And so the question is, where is the center of gravity of this regime is that it might break? Where do you see that?
Excellent questions. And actually, the first challenge that you raised, and I think an excellent one, was something that I forgot to mention. The Israeli strategy of this decapitation strikes was a novel strategy. It worked effectively against Hezbollah and Hamas for one single reason, because it was dealing with non-state actors. You remove a person and there is a confusion. Okay, what do we do now? They don't know what to do. but you're now dealing with a state actor that has a constitution in place. Everybody knows what to do at the time when their boss is gone. When Raisi, for example, was killed in a helicopter crash, you quickly had the vice president taking over. Within 51 days, you had elections coming in. So again, this applies to, in this case too, when Khamenei was removed from the scene, immediately you had the council, the interim council of leadership taking over the responsibilities. You have the president, you have a member of the Guardian Council, and you also have the head of the judiciary. They're running the government until the Assembly of Experts will convene to appoint the next supreme leader. Now we had information that the building of the Assembly of Experts was attacked, and that is correct. But the members of the Assembly of Experts were not targeted. And it's a big number. It's 100-something members of the Assembly of Experts. It makes targeting them extremely difficult. Even if any country is lucky, I mean, being Israel, Germany, Great Britain, the U.S. are successful in removing half of them, there is still a half that can convene in a point. By some work of God, if you take out all of them, there is a process for electing the Assembly of Experts. There will be elections for it. There will be snap elections for it. So again, everything is set. And I think the wheels of the selection process are already moving or turning to select. We've already have information that Mojtaba is being seriously considered for the position. Trump actually alluded that he wants to play a role in the succession process. I have no idea how that works. It would make him Ayatollah Trump. I have no idea. But we already have that process already in motion. So, and in terms of what was and popularity at home, absolutely, I agree with you. I would say 15% to 20%, but this 15% to 20% of a 93 million population is quite large. But an 80% majority of the people, and rightfully so, want this regime gone. This 80% is sheltering now. They're scared. They don't think about democracy anymore. They're thinking about their lives, their livelihoods that is being destroyed. Tehran is being flattened. Civilian casualties are very high. So I don't think they're thinking about democracy anymore. They're thinking about their future. But that 20% that is extremely loyal to the regime and is benefiting from the regime is still loyal, is still willing to sacrifice for the ideals of the revolution. And right now that there's an aerial campaign, yes, you don't see them on the street, but once that stops, they will come out and they will do anything to support the Islamic Republic.
So
But, and I will tell you
one last
last sentence. I apologize. Everything I say might be proven wrong tomorrow. I take that responsibility. I might be proven wrong, but that's how I see things going.
Mm-hmm. We share the same problem. I have faced it many times before, been wrong so many times. But let me touch just before we move on to the next question, and that is, so from your assessment, in a short answer, unless there are troops on the ground, being those troops American troops, so meaning no courts troop, no
Right.
other troops, there needs to be American troops on the ground, we're not going to see a regime change. That is basically, if I kind of summarize it into a one bottom line sentence.
I would give it a 80% probability then that is the case.
And if we move and we see the regime, we see that survival is the goal. That's clear. Everybody understand that. But can you share if there are other goals that the regime have in terms of maybe shaping a narrative for the day after, i.e., we fought against everybody and survived, or in terms of like, look, they brought in the Kurds. If it's not us, the country will be dismantled into pieces. Because those are some of the narratives we saw going around there. Are there any other objectives that the regime has in Iran that are not related to only survival? So in other ways, basically the day after for the day after, goals for the day after, from the regime perspective?
Well, from their perspective, again, this sense of self-victimization, resistance, the need for resistance and sacrifice was something that Israelis did to Khamenei, and I think they did him a huge favor by sanctifying him, by making him a martyr now. Khamenei had three options. Death comes to all of us, death and taxes, as they say. Khamenei had three options. One, die in his bed, being dragged in front of the cameras, humiliated, and later be hung, or dying in his office, doing his job and being martyred. In the month, again, I want everybody to pay attention. This is the month of Ramadan in Iran. Iranian media, especially the pro-IRGC conservative camps, are now portraying him as similar to Ali, the first Shia faith, who was also assassinated in the month of Ramadan with two strikes of a sword. Ironically, Khamenei was also killed in two missile strikes. So they're making a lot of comparison that, oh, Khamenei died like his master, Ali. Now, once the war ends, I think that the first objective would be first, reconstruction, and second, try to rebound in the region. I don't believe that I believe that the first priority would be reconstruction, ensure the survival, and second, to rebound. History teaches us that great powers, now in the case of Iran, Iran is a regional great power. So I would say that the great powers' influence and power projection flow ebbs and flows. Now we're at the time where Iranian influence has been severely hampered in the region, but ultimately I think that it will rebound. This is why I think, and where I think, U.S. and Israeli objectives are diverging. And what do I mean by that? U.S. will be okay with an Islamic Republic that is actually would like an Islamic or any regime in Iran that is pro-Western, supports Western interests, its economy thrives, it doesn't want political instability in Iran, as long as they abide by the rules of the game, right? That's what the U.S. wants. Think of, for example, Venezuela, Dorsey Rodriguez, for example. That's what the Trump administration wants.
The idea of alignment.
Pardon?
The idea of alignment, that they will be
Right.
aligned to the U.S. goals and
Absolutely.
objectives.
Absolutely. As long as it doesn't oppose the U.S. objectives in the Middle East strongly, the U.S. would be okay with it. But the Israeli objectives, I think, are quite different. If I'm sitting in Israel, I would prefer to deal, and I've been on your programs many times, we've spoken about this. I think Israeli objectives, if I'm sitting in Israel, I would prefer an Iran that is weakened rather than an Iran that is, with its economy thriving. It has access to modern weapon systems. It has an industrial capacity for nuclear weapons. It has a robust defense capacity. Just give you an example. Most of the equipment, military equipment that Iran has is produced at home. Now, this regime can go, and I'm all for it, but next regime that comes in knows how to build missiles, knows how to use them, knows how to make nuclear weapons. And if I'm sitting in Israel, I would prefer a weakened Iran. And don't take my words for it. The former Israeli negotiator, I forgot his name, but he was on the show recently, and he said our objective in Iran is not a regime change, but rather chaos. A chaos in Iran means a distracted Iran that cannot project power in the region, which serves the Israeli interest. And it makes perfect strategic sense, to be honest with you.
So there was one thing which is very interesting that before I go into the later thing, and that is you mentioned about the religious dimension. I think for us
Mhm.
it's a bit difficult to kind of think about it, to grasp it, especially in the
Sure.
West. But definitely, the Ayatollah was a leader of Shia communities across the Middle East and South Asia, India, Pakistan as well.
Pakistan.
So
Yes,
definitely, it looks like the narrative is already being built of him basically being a sacrifice during the month of Ramadan,
absolutely.
being basically a holy man, versus the narrative which was just a month before of him basically slaughtering his own people, and that's why
Sure.
many people. I heard that from a few people that said he actually wanted that to happen, as you said, because that
Absolutely.
kind of
It's the
clean
best
his
death that he could
image for
get.
the legacy. An 86 years old man, he was already dying. But let's go back to what you said. It sounds like there is an impossibility here, which is on the
Mhm.
one hand, if you don't lead to a regime change in Iran, the people of Iran, those 80% who don't support the regime, they're going to suffer because at the end
Sure.
of the day, the regime will look back at who was there on their side and who wasn't. On the other hand, it sounds like if we are looking into regime change in Iran, we're looking
Mhm.
into the potential of chaos for various reasons, from the ethnic to the fact that the opposition was oppressed for so long by the regime itself, and so on and so on. So it looks like no matter how I tell this story, there is no happy end. This is not going to be a fairy tale story where everybody is happy. Somebody is going to suffer. My question to you here is, if you look now at what the United States and Israel are doing in their strategy in order to
Mhm.
basically look at not regime change, because they're not declaring that
Yeah.
as their goal, but a change
Yeah.
regime, can we see a change regime in Iran that is not going to be so ruthless towards its own people, that is going to be more open and less tyrant towards the people of Iran? Or is that basically choosing one dictator over the other, but as long as it's our SOB, it's okay, the
Yeah.
famous quote.
Yeah. Look, I certainly hope that this regime goes and it is replaced by a regime that treats its people the way they deserve. That is not being killed and slaughtered on the streets for protesting, expressing their grievances. But I'm afraid that bombing bombing campaigns, war is not conducive to democracy. That's just the lessons of history to us. I don't think that what Pete Hegseth said on in a press conference that we're bringing death and destruction. That's his words, not mine. The death and destruction that they are bringing to Iran will lead to democracy. People are suffering. The air bombing, the bombing campaigns overnight have traumatized the people. I have friends and family, relatives in Iran. They've been traumatized. Some of them have fled the city. And I can tell you this for certainty that none of them is talking about democracy or human rights. Everybody is thinking about survival. Now, what will happen in the next regime, I cannot guarantee it, but I can tell you that if the Islamic Republic survives, at least for a short period of time, it will become more authoritarian to quell any potential threats. I am concerned now that with the now confirmed reports that the CIA and potentially Mossad, I have not seen any information, but there's a good likelihood that Mossad is also supporting the Kurds. If there's an uprising in Kurdish areas, Islamic Republic will use that to even crack down more on the Kurdish minority. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is of Kurdish descent. He lives in the United States. And I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, you know, picking up guns and bearing arms on behalf of the Kurdish aspirations, and 0 being very loyal to the Islamic Republic, where do you put the Kurdish minority now? And he said three. Three means that it is unlikely that there will be a major Kurdish uprising in Iran. But I'm very concerned that these reports that we're reading will be used. It's already actually being used by the Islamic Republic to attack Kurdish areas. We already know that information. So these are the concerns that I have. So again, I wish I had good news that this bombing campaign will bring democracy to Iranians. Absolutely not. The help that was underway, that's what Trump said, is actually bringing a lot of, frankly, death and destruction. I'll stop here. I'll say one more sentence and I'll stop here. The 160 schoolgirls that were killed in apparent U.S. airstrikes have fundamentally changed the view of many Iranians in Iran and in the diaspora, including myself.
So I want to go to this the way that I kind of imagine this webinar is to divide it into two, and that is regime change versus a change regime. So before we go into questions
Mhm.
related to change regime, there's some questions here from the audience, and I want to touch those. So one of the question regards to the loyalty, and that is
Mhm.
how loyal are the people that are part of the instruments of the regime, i.e. Basij, IRGC, to the regime itself. Meaning, and I think if we put historical context, are they loyal, i.e., death loyal, meaning that no matter what, they will go up and down with the regime, or it's what we saw in Iraq '91. Basically, the first moment they can, they will just run for their life and abandon. Like what we will see from this kind of from the people who are serving in those institutions slash organizations.
Yeah. Well, it's an excellent question. I'm giving you my opinion as someone who's sitting 10,000 kilometers away. But I think that if there's a ground invasion, I am sure there is a core of the regime that will fight to the end. But there's also apolitical organizations such as the the Iranian army, the Artesh, the conventional military, that is an apolitical organization. It will fight, but when it comes to, let's say, choosing between Islamic Republic and a future government, I think that they will politely surrender. Um, I loathe the example. I don't make the argument that IRGC is SS. I'm not saying that, but I think that some of the elements of IRGC will fight to the end, like how the SS troops fought to the end because of the ideology, because they were indoctrinated by the Islamic Republic, and they think that the only way is resistance and martyrdom will bring them honor and glory.
So I want to move to the part of the change regime. So it
Okay,
looks like the political conclusion to this war would be not a regime change, but a change regime, as far as we know as of
right,
today, because tomorrow, like you said, could be something else. But as far as we know
sure.
as of today, uh, it is looking like that a change regime would be acceptable for the U.S. government, maybe not for Israel, but for the U.S. government, in order to
Yes.
basically align them with their interests, which means no nuclear program, no missiles program, and no supporting of those axis abroad. Now, if we see a change regime that is based on the fundamental of the current regime, what kind of a shape
Mhm.
will it have? I mean, what kind of what are we talking about here? Is this going to be something that basically going to resemble Iraq post 91 all the way to 2003? So a very weak regime, but still very strong at home in terms of oppression, but still operating? Or is it going to look like something like you mentioned Japan and Germany? So some sort of a regime that's going to look like into the West and apply those kind of Western goals and objectives into their own interests. How do you see that kind of a regime basically evolving?
A change regime. That's an excellent question, and I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. Um, um, I would say that the general sentiment in the West is that the Ayatollahs are a bunch of crazy old bearded men who don't understand the politics. They don't understand how the world works. But this misses the point that the Ayatollahs are actually very smart people. They're well versed. They've been deceiving people for the past 3,000. Not the Ayatollah, the clerical class in Iran has been deceiving the people for the past 3,000 years. In the past 600 years, the Ayatollah, the Shia clergy, have been deceiving the people. They're very good at it. They would do anything to stay in power. So if the Islamic Republic does manage to survive, and if we do see a change regime, I don't expect to see, and I certainly hope not to see an Iraq because of the immense amount of suffering of the civilians. But I think that they will play along with some of the U.S. demands. I don't believe that Iran will ultimately give up on their nuclear program or the missile program because it does not make strategic sense for Iranians to do so. If you take away the Iranian missile program from them, they have no means of defense. They might as well just dismantle the armed forces and send them home. What's the point of having an armed force when it does not have, it cannot use the backbone of its defense? But I certainly think that helping the United States in shaping the regional dynamics, that includes the proxy forces, non-state allies, would something that Iranians would be willing to work with. And this is exactly what happened with Hezbollah in 2003 when Iranians, as part of their so-called grand bargain to the United States, offered it to the Americans, which unfortunately was dismissed. That's what I think. But again, I do want to emphasize that when it comes to Iran, and I've been studying Iran for my entire life, I've dedicated my academic work to studying Iran, but I can be proven wrong because that's the nature of international politics. In the case of Iran, it's even more complicated because Iranians sometimes move in ways that it baffles me. I never thought that in October 2024, Iran would decide to strike Israel. And I told my students that absolutely no way Iranians will not strike Israel in the second round of clashes. And the next day they did. So I do want to emphasize that anything I say here might be wrong. Iran could go the Iraq way. I certainly hope not. But I see a changed regime, a regime that is more, let's say, amenable to U.S. pressure. The last thing I'm going to say is that I think something I've said on your show is that American policymakers think in terms of election cycles. Iranian policymakers think in terms of a decade from now, 20 years from now. They think that they can outlast the United States, and this is simply because of the dint of Iranian history, civilization, etc., etc.
You're touching a point that I was asked a lot, actually, which is what are the chances that the Iranian regime will just going to put a puppet, camouflage the real nature of the regime with a nice, softly spoken clerk,
Sure.
and then basically after Trump is basically out of the White House and maybe a better government in terms for them is
Sure.
in the White House
Absolutely.
and a situation change, they will go back to their old ways. What's the possibility of that happening?
Excellent question, excellent scenario, and I think it's very likely actually. They might say, okay, if Donald Trump approves of Mojtaba, we'll bring Mojtaba, where IRGC is behind the scene running the show because Mojtaba is not an influential figure, does not have the same power and influence of Khamenei. IRGC, whereas IRGC is very powerful. Now, they think they can outlast Trump 3 years. They're gonna play nice. Once he's out of office, they can move. When I say they, means IRGC. And then you're going to have a case of Egypt, for example, or Pakistan, where a military dictatorship is in charge in Iran and does what it wants, but on the surface plays along with the U.S. But one
What would
thing,
be a
Oren,
result?
may I say,
Yes, please.
yeah, one thing I want to add, I said it briefly, we cannot and should not dismiss the history of Iran as a nation state and a very old civilization. For them, occupation of Iran in World War One, World War Two is yesterday. I'm talking about something happened 100 years ago or 80 years ago, but for them this is something very recent. They think about this, they take lessons from it, and all they think is that yes, we may be temporarily weakened, but ultimately we can rebound and kind of go back to the factory settings of trying to what they think is to become the hegemon of the region. That's the objective that the Safavid in 1500s had. This is the objective that the Shah of Iran had. And this is the objective that the Islamic Republic has.
What would you think would be a change regime that the public in Iran would accept? So it seems like there is no change regime that they will accept, but is there a possibility that they might accept a certain sort of a change regime that is still linked and it's still based on the old regime, but it's basically shifted, at least in foreign policy, maybe also internally?
Yeah. Again, another excellent question. I don't think Iranians are asking for much. I don't think that they care whether it's an Islamic Republic or a monarchy. As long as they can have a decent life, that they're not prosecuted, tortured, or killed for basic things, that they can travel, they can go abroad, educate, come back. There's so many Iranians who came to the West, earned advanced degrees, and they wanted to go back to Iran and serve their country. But the Islamic Republic, as it always does, dismissed them, didn't want them because they were not aligned with the ideology of the Islamic Republic. Now, what Iranians are asking, again, as I said, a decent life and jobs, normal life, which I think it can take us back to the slogan of the Mahsa movement, woman, life, freedom, equality, dignity, and freedom for the citizens of Iran who, for the past 150 years, have been trying to express themselves, gain more representation in the affairs of their country. That's what they want.
So I want to touch 2 points related to the regime change, not the change regime, but important ones. And I will ask you in short, and if you can go also in short, because we cover a lot today.
Sure,
So
sure.
the question is, a lot of people have raised the topic that the regime is not so much ideological as much as it is survival in mode, that the sense that they know that the day after they will be basically prosecuted, punished, and it's their own life
Absolutely.
basically instead. And one of the
Yes.
ideas running around is the idea of basically offering an amnesty to those involved in the regime, including asylum for some of those leaders within the regime. Would
Yeah.
that be something that the Iranian people accept? Would that be something that you think will work?
I think so, but I'm afraid that the people who are being offered this amnesty cannot trust that. Some of the commentary that we've seen, especially from the pro-monarchist groups, are very concerning to me as someone who has no political affiliation to any. I'm not monarchist, I'm not pro-Islamic Republic, I'm a boring academic, and I try to look at everything objectively. Some of the comments that I've seen on TV, that the pro-monarchists are vowing to prosecute everybody, take revenge. Somebody was this Iranian monarchist from Canada had told a kind of ideological professor in Tehran that once the regime changes, we're going to come after you. We're going to tear you apart, and the biggest part of your body is going to be your little pinky. So if you're sitting in Tehran and you're watching this and you have some command position, you fight for your survival because you know that you cannot go to the West. Unlike the Shah's generals who were welcomed in the West, they have no place to go. They're facing prosecution, execution, confiscation of the property, perhaps harm to their family. So they have to fight for their survival. And this is why I'm thinking that it is very difficult to trust even the verbal amnesties that are being thrown around. I saw, and I don't hold the son of the Shah as much as I respect and his father, but some of the commentary from the Shah's son are just mind-boggling. He claims that he has had the Pledge of Allegiance of 50,000 members of the Iranian security and military forces. When the Iranian people were being massacred on the streets of Tehran, not 100 of them showed up to defend people or to at least stay home and not to shoot people. This is why I'm saying that I will not, if I'm one of those people who is being offered amnesty, I don't think so. That's not, from my perspective, they have to fight for their survival. I hope this does make sense.
It makes sense, and I want to move to the third card, which is the opposition.
Okay.
I want to ask you two questions, basically. One, do you think once the bombing is over, we're going to see protests in the streets?
I doubt that. I honestly doubt that. Again, because I want to go back to history. History teaches us that people don't come to the streets. They don't think about democracy and human rights. People will be preoccupied with rebuilding their homes, jobs, economic desperation. The footage that I'm seeing from Tehran is not being strategic or being targeted in precision strikes. Tehran is actually being flattened nonstop overnight. People's homes have been destroyed repeatedly. Civilian casualty is immense. I don't think that people who are grieving, people who are fighting for their survival, economic survival, can or will think about democracy and human rights. They actually need government support to rebuild their homes. So if you need the government's support to rebuild your home, you don't think about or speak about democracy.
From your perspective, if the opposition tomorrow morning wants to launch a campaign in order to overthrow the regime, what would they need? What would be the most urgent needs? Because it seems that there's so much kind of disorganization when it comes to the opposition because of the efficiency of the Iranian authorities in crushing it down over the years. So, what would you
Yes.
say if the United States slash Israel or anyone else wants to support those opposition groups? What would be the thing that they would need?
I think it's a great question. What the opposition would need. It's it's a difficult question. Well, let me put it this way. The Iranian opposition, as you pointed out, is very disorganized. There are several groups. MEK, which has many. That's Mujahideen Khalq. It's a Marxist Islamic terrorist organization. Has a lot of American officials on its payroll. Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, members of Congress. They've been paid huge sums of money to support MEK's cause. And these are on the record. People can go and look up, for example, Mike Pompeo's tax returns that were published. He received some $100,000 for one speech. So, and I'll just stop here. So, and nobody, whether you're a monarchist, whether you're a hardcore Basij member or IRGC member, everybody hates MEK in Iran. So they are out of the question. My concern is that these U.S. politicians try to impose MEK on Iranians. That's the worst case scenario. And then you have the monarchists, and I think the crown prince is being, in the past 2 weeks, he has lost a lot of his, let's say, legitimacy because he's now being viewed as someone who's being supported by the West and to be imposed on Iranians from the top. I don't know if anyone watched those two Russian pranksters that spoke to Reza Pahlavi. I don't know if anyone saw that. I was fascinating. There's this guy who pretends with the name of Adolf and who wears a fake mustache in Hitler's style and identifies himself as an advisor to German Chancellor. And Reza Pahlavi fell for it. And all he did was to repeatedly show his subservience, if I may say so, to foreign governments. Iranians are a very nationalistic country. They don't want to have a leader that is being imposed upon them from the outside. Now, this doesn't mean that Reza Pahlavi has no support in Iran. He does, absolutely, because they think what the media has done is that they have created this false dichotomy, if I may say so, of choosing either Islamic Republic or the Pahlavi, right? And people look and say, well, under the Pahlavi, things were not that bad at all, after all. We had a thriving economy. Yes, there was authoritarianism, but it was good, right? So what can the West do? And my comments are blasphemy in Washington, but I think that economic sanctions on Iran have devastated the livelihood of Iranians. Many Iranians, including myself, who despise the Islamic Republic, have been affected by the U.S. sanctions. Just to give you a simple example, Iranians cannot come to the United States to pursue education because there's a travel ban. If you're an Iranian student, you cannot pursue certain degrees in American or European countries. If you're an Iranian, you cannot present papers in Western academic conferences. You cannot purchase medicine from outside world because European companies refuse to do any transaction that has Iran to do with it. I'll stop here, but I don't think, I mean, what the West shouldn't do is to make it look like that they're imposing a leader on Iranians. And I'll stop here. Sorry about the rant.
No, no worries. So we're in the last 10 minutes. I want to move forward to the last, well, before the last section, and that is the actual war in the thinking and strategy of the leadership. So maybe you can explain a little bit more with clarity what led to the Iranian leadership decision to essentially bombard the region. And specifically, I would ask within that question, I'm talking about the retaliation to them being attacked. So they didn't start it, understood.
Right.
But specifically with that, why they're targeting the UAE so much versus other Arab countries that they are bordering. And this is question number one with the sub questions. Why they decided to take the strategy of basically the fire ring and shooting the shotgun approach, and two, why the UAE is the main target of that. And then I'll ask about the Houthis, which is a second question. But let's start with those two.
Well, first of all, let me say that one should not look at this as a knee-jerk reaction to foreign attacks. They've been planning for this for a very long time, and the reason is very simple: to send the message that if you host American bases, American interests in our neighborhood, we're gonna make you pay the price for it. And they have not spared anybody. The Kuwaitis, I have a very good, a former student who's from Kuwait, And he was telling me that their daily lives have been interrupted, affected by the constant bombardment and explosions that are coming from Iran. Now, why the UAE? I think it's very clear because UAE, as much as Iran has good commercial relations with Dubai, one of the Emirates, Abu Dhabi, the political emirate, has been historically more hostile toward the Islamic Republic and Iran in general because of the dispute over the three Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf. And plus, it has Israeli embassy on it. So it gives them every reason to try to attack UAE the most. But and plus, we also have to keep in mind that UAE has many American interests in it. So this is why I think that the Iranians are targeting the GCC countries the most. Um, I'll say one more thing very quickly, that we have to look at this as a deliberate escalation by Iranians. Initially, it was just missile strikes, and then it was isolated targeting of oil tankers, then a full disclosure of the Strait of Hormuz, then the attempt to use Iranian Air Force, which for the first time came to the conflict when two Sukhoi 24 tactical bombers trying to take out the American base in Dubai, in Qatar, and they were shot down 2 minutes from their destination. So it's deliberate, it is calculated, and it is, at least from their perspective, it's well planned ahead of time. It's not a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, within that calculation, we see that the Houthis are not being deployed, i.e., not being
Yeah.
used in the war, and the word "yet" is very important here. Why is that? What's the reason for that? Well, we see Hezbollah, we see the Iraqi militias being activated, so to speak. The Houthis are not being activated. It caught some people by surprise that the Houthis themselves were not
Yes.
part of the of this war campaign so far.
Another excellent question. I think that it takes us to the conversation that you and I have had before, that the word proxy force is not appropriate to use for these groups. Proxy means that they don't have an agency on their own. Hezbollah has very good relations with Iran. Hamas has not had good relations with Iran. In the case of Houthis, Iran really bandwagon on Houthi cause to bleed Saudi Arabia in Yemen. Yes, Iran has supported them. Yes, Iran has transferred technology and I'm sure money to them. But this doesn't mean that the Houthis don't have their own agency. We saw that last year, Houthis, to kind of portray themselves as the champion of the Palestinian cause, they were attacking Israeli ships, but then ultimately they made their own peace with the Trump administration because they didn't want to be targeted. So it is not the case that Iran picks up the phone and tells the Houthis that you're going to strike. They have not, and I am skeptical that they will, because they made their own peace with Donald Trump.
How substantial would be a Kurdish attack in case it happens? Because it looks that a Kurdish attack, if it does happen, will be limited to those Kurdish regions of Iran. So it's not necessarily going to lead to a regime change, but would that be substantial in any way or form for the Iranian regime, knowing that the Kurdish revolt in that area? Would that be something that might push them? Because it seems that it's a lot of pressure from a form of creating leverage for the negotiations, not as much as it
Right.
is for strategic objectives on the ground. So how significant would be if they join the fight?
It will certainly create a headache for the Iranians. But I'm going to go back to what I said. On a scale of 3 to 10, they don't have that much popularity inside the Kurdish areas in Iran. I will add one more thing, that in the Kurdish area, the Kurdistan, Kermanshah, there are substantial and large army and IRGC units, including the 81st Infantry Division of the Army. There is a an armored division of the army, and the way they man those bases is quite clever. And that is, they deploy non-Kurdish troops there, so they eliminate any chance of, let's say, defection from the troops. I'm sure there might be some, I don't know, low-ranking conscripts there, but the senior officers, the enlisted cadre, they are not from that region, and this is deliberate to eliminate the possibility of defection. We also have I forgot the name, but there's an infantry division of the IRGC that, again, we have to keep in mind that are very loyal to the Islamic Republic. So yes, it could create a headache, but I don't foresee a substantial challenge to the Islamic Republic.
I'll make it quick. Two final questions. One, what is the topic slash aspect that you think is not getting the attention, or it's getting the wrong attention, or it's under the radar, that basically is not being discussed but should be discussed because it's important? And what is that? And what do you think we should look at?
Let me take off my academic hat and put on my Iranian hat for a moment. I think that two things are happening. When first, there is not enough attention to the civilian casualties. Western media constantly portrays this as a precision strike against military intelligence targets, which is absolutely true, but there is a widespread bombing campaign, and I've been trying to emphasize this and reiterate that there is a bombing campaign that is targeting civilians. People's homes have been destroyed, people have lost their livelihoods, etc., etc. So this needs to be talked about. This needs to be discussed. I think it looks bad. It is the basic human decency that human civilian casualties are reprehensible. Nobody, including myself, will shed any tears for the late Ayatollah Khamenei. I think he was a brutal dictator. But civilian casualties, 160 children went to school in the morning and never came back. It's reprehensible. The second thing is there's a lot of media coverage of Iranians who support the bombings and the attacks, which is absolutely true, no question in that. But there is a group, a good number of people who are saying, again, that's me, Islamic Republic is reprehensible, does not deserve to rule Iranian people, but the voices of those who oppose the war are being marginalized, not covered in mainstream media. The only people who are getting the coverage are those that are being in support of the war. And all you have to do is to go on the White House's Twitter account. It constantly shows Iranians who are cheering, partying in favor of Iran being bombed. And I think it's wrong. At this point, is not. Let me put it this way: it is propaganda. So, and I'll stop here.
Final question, and it's more of a looking forward prophecy slash guessing. I understand, but still want to hear your thoughts. How will this all end, in your opinion?
It will end when one side decides to blink first. I cannot tell you how long. In the long term, in the war of attrition, there's no question that the United States will prevail. Iranian strategy, and this is something I am certain about, and I'm putting on my academic hat now, Iranian strategy is to deny the United States and Israel a decisive victory. That means, or denying that decisive victory means victory for Iran itself. In the short term, I think Iran is quite capable of it, but in the long term, in the war of attrition, there's no question that Iran, or any other country for that matter, will be able to defeat the United States in a military confrontation. So I don't know when it will end. I cannot give you a number, but it will only end when costs are unbearable for one side. Iran has a good capacity to absorb punishment and casualties. American public is not like the Iranian public. It is very sensitive to the images of American soldiers covered in American flags being sent home. That's not how Iranians think or perceive. For them, if 20,000 Iranians have to die for the future of the country, that's all right. Let's just go back to history again. In 8 years of war with Iraq, Iran lost 300,000 troops, and that was okay. The country was exhausted, but that was okay. It paid the price. In 21 or 20 years of war in Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, the U.S. lost 8,000, 7,000 troops. And we saw the public sensitivity and public opposition simply because of seeing those images of American soldiers coming back. And I hate to see that. I will stop here. I'm a proud Iranian. I'm a proud American. I'm in a very difficult position now. I love both countries, and I don't want to see Iranian deaths or American deaths or any death or any civilian death, be it in Israel, be it in Iran, be it in GCC countries. I hope the war ends very soon.
Sina Azodi, thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar, for sharing your thoughts, also and the insights that you provided. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the members of the crowd who sent us questions via the chat. Also, in the registration form, many of you, some of the questions that I asked today, many of you sent it to us. So that was very helpful, very challenging question and thought-provoking. So thank you, everybody who joined us today. Thank you, Sina. And join us again. We're going to have another webinar, I believe, on Thursday with Dr. Neil Quilliam from Chatham House about the Gulf countries, and we're thinking of having another one. Depends on how tired I'm going to be. I see Sina is also you're also passing through the same lane, as they say. So thank you, everybody who joined us, and well, have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.